Still tinkering with that little tech hobby, Ethan? Gerald Whitmore's voice boomed across the sun-drenched patio, drawing a ripple of laughter from the guests lounging beneath oversized umbrellas. When are you going to step into the real world of business, son? I tightened my grip on my iced tea, my smile frozen in place as my father-in-law strolled toward me, the manicured gardens of his Napa Valley estate stretching in perfect symmetry behind him. Yet another reminder of his dominance in every conversation. The platform's gaining traction, I said evenly. We've secured 3 major enterprise clients this quarter alone. Gerald let out a bark of laughter that turned heads. Enterprise clients? What is that? An HR software for food trucks? Sounds adorable. He gave my shoulder a condescending pat, a little too firm like always. Look around, Ethan. This is what legacy looks like. My name is Ethan Navarro, though most people in Gerald's circle know me as Camille Whitmore's husband, or worse, that app guy she married instead of Brendan Carlisle, the investment banker Gerald had practically raised as a son-in-law in waiting. At 30, I'd spent the last 7 years building Nimbus Grid, a cloud infrastructure startup born out of late-night coding sessions and a stubborn belief that efficiency didn't have to be ugly. But to Gerald, I was still the unknown kid from Santa Cruz who somehow slipped into his family tree. Dad, don't start. Camille appeared at my side, her hand brushing mine with practiced subtlety. Let Ethan enjoy the party. It's your anniversary celebration, not a boardroom pitch. Gerald waved her off. I'm just trying to save him from wasting his best years. He still has time to join Whitmore Capital. We need someone to manage the digital side. As if that was the same as building back-end architecture that powers logistics for Fortune 100. I opened my mouth to respond, but Camille's soft touch on my wrist told me to hold it. We'd played this scene before. Gerald didn't understand startups. He understood power. Thanks, but I like where I am, I said with a half smile, lifting my glass in mock salute. Your call, he said with a shrug, already scanning the crowd for his next captive. Just don't come asking me for a job when the money dries up. Camille leaned in close. I'm sorry. You know how he gets. I nodded. I did know. Every party, every holiday, every toast. Gerald reminded me that in his world, I was a placeholder. But I also knew something else. In just 2 weeks, Nimbus Grid would close a Series B round, led by one of Gerald's biggest rivals, and Gerald Whitmore would finally learn what real traction looked like. Your mom's been trying to get your attention for the last 5 minutes. Camille's voice was low, her eyes flicking toward the buffet where her mother stood, cocktail in hand, watching us with barely veiled expectation. She hesitated, caught between standing by my side and fulfilling her social role. Are you sure? Go, I said with a reassuring smile. I need to check on a few emails anyway. She kissed my cheek, then drifted away with a grace I'd always admired, slipping seamlessly into the role of the Whitmore family's golden daughter, polished, poised, and always perfectly timed. I watched her disappear into the circle of guests, still marveling at how she could balance 2 radically different worlds. Mine, lean and hungry, and her father's, bloated with old money and boardroom ego. Finding a quieter corner near the rose trellis, I pulled out my phone. There were 5 messages from Lena, our lead developer at Nimbus Grid, all flagged urgent. Lena, Ethan. Google responded. It's not a maybe, call me, now. My pulse kicked. For 3 months, we'd been courting Google's cloud division with our security protocol. This deal could transform us from a scrappy startup into a market disruptor. I opened the attachment with a shaky thumb. And then the world fell silent. Their offer was beyond generous. A full platform integration, licensing rights, exclusive security coverage for their enterprise users. They weren't testing the waters. They were diving in. Call in 30 seconds. The phone buzzed almost instantly. Please tell me this is real. My voice was barely a whisper. Triple verified, Lena replied, breathless. We got preliminary contracts. Legal reviewed them already. They want to go public next week. I leaned against the railing, eyes on the horizon. The sky had turned a shade of gold only Napa could pull off at dusk. Next week? That's fast. That's Google, she laughed. Joint press release, full PR cycle, signing ceremony at Mountain View. You'll need to fly out. I ran a hand through my hair. And that's not all, is it? Nope, she grinned through the phone. Apple pinged us right after. Rumor must have leaked. They want to talk collaboration. For a moment, I didn't speak. Just watched as Gerald Whitmore from across the lawn raised his glass mid-sentence, probably telling some dramatic tale of market conquest. He called my work small time. Send me the full packet, I said. And Lena, excellent job. Thanks, boss. Want me to start drafting something for Apple? Not yet, I smirked. Let's enjoy this silence. Something tells me the noise is about to start. And this time, I'd be the one making it. The same stories Gerald had told for years, each one a stage for his genius, his timing, his unmatched instinct. I spotted Camille from across the patio. She raised a brow, our silent signal. You good? I gave a small nod. More than good. Ethan, Gerald's voice sliced through my thoughts like a champagne saber. Stop hiding with your phone and join us. Howard here was just asking about your, what do you call it? Your app business. I pocketed my phone, exhaled, and walked toward the group. Howard Lane, an aging venture capitalist who still thought MySpace was cutting edge, peered at me through gold-rimmed glasses. Gerald says you do something with computers? He asked, the same way someone might ask a teen about their summer job at a mall kiosk. Cybersecurity, I said smoothly. We build adaptive protection protocols for cloud infrastructure, particularly enterprise-level platforms. Ow, Howard said with a vague smile, clearly out of his depth. Very modern. Gerald chuckled. Ethan thinks he's going to change the world. Neural networks, machine learning, all that techie stuff. He turned to me, faux curious. What are you up to now? 10 employees? Maybe 15? 28, I replied evenly. And we're in talks to expand our engineering team this quarter. Gerald clapped his hands together, loud enough to draw eyes. 28, he declared. Meanwhile, Whitmore Capital just launched our Singapore office. Thompson? His CFO stepped forward like a trained dog. 12,082 full-time employees globally, sir. Now that, Gerald said, raising his glass, is scale. That's real business. That's legacy. The circle of men nodded as if they were watching Moses part the sea. Across the lawn, I caught Camille's gaze again. Her lips were pressed in a tight line. She hated this. The subtle humiliations, the backhanded digs. But we both knew calling him out would only escalate it. I cleared my throat. Actually, I said, keeping my voice calm, we're very intentional with our size. It keeps us nimble, especially with how fast the cybersecurity landscape evolves. Innovation needs room to pivot. Gerald gave a benevolent chuckle. Of course, of course. Small can be quaint. He turned back to his circle. Did I ever tell you about the time I flipped Pacific Steel in 8 weeks? As he launched into the story for the 100th time, I glanced at my phone again. Lena had sent the updated valuation. 974 million. Google wasn't just integrating our system. They were valuing Nimbus Grid at almost $1 billion. A gentle touch on my arm. I looked up. Camille. You okay? She whispered. I smiled. I'm great. Because what Gerald didn't know was that the little fish he mocked, I was about to eat the whale. Remember when you told me to wait for the perfect moment to prove him wrong? I asked softly. Camille tilted her head, curiosity flashing in her eyes. Yeah? I think it's coming soon. Before she could say more, Gerald's voice boomed again from across the patio. Ethan, put that damn phone away. It's my anniversary, for God's sake. Show a little respect. I slipped the phone into my pocket, swallowing the grin that threatened to rise. Camille's advice echoed in my head like a mantra. Patience. Don't let him see it coming. Let him watch it unfold. The next few days blurred into strategy calls and legal revisions. While Gerald's lavish anniversary bash made headlines in Napa society, Nimbus Grid was preparing to sign with one of the biggest names in tech. Camille didn't ask questions. Though she clearly sensed something brewing, she never pressed, just offered quiet support, the kind that meant more than any business advice. One night, as we got ready for bed, she smirked. "Whatever you're planning, promise me one thing." "What's that?" I asked. "Record his reaction." She kissed my cheek. "I want a front row seat." "You'll get it," I whispered. The following Wednesday, Gerald summoned the family for one of his trademark dinners. Thinly veiled lectures disguised as meals. He texted us that afternoon. "Bring your appetite, and Ethan, wear a real suit this time, no startup casual." Camille snorted when I read it to her. One of these days he'll figure out that tech doesn't care about cufflinks. I straightened the Hermes tie she gave me. Maybe sooner than he thinks. In the elevator, we rode in silence, both of us wrapped in thought. I noticed her biting her lower lip, something she only did when she was truly anxious. "What's on your mind?" I asked. She hesitated. "Dad's been meeting with VCs. I overheard Mom talking about it. He's planning to launch a tech division. Said he's tired of watching Silicon Valley get all the glory." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? After all his lectures about real business? Just be careful." She touched my arm. "When Dad feels threatened, he doesn't play fair." "I know," I said, covering her hand with mine, "but neither do I." The elevator doors opened into Gerald's marble and gold penthouse, where Thompson, his ever-loyal CFO, waited at the entrance like a butler in a boardroom. "Miss Camille, Mr. Navarro," he nodded. "Mr. Whitmore would like a word with you before dinner. He's in his study." Camille gave my hand one last squeeze and disappeared down the hall. I followed Thompson, each step muffled by Persian rugs older than my company, but not, I suspected, nearly as valuable. Not anymore. Gerald's study was built to command respect. Dark oak paneling, low leather chairs, and towering windows that looked out over Napa's vineyard-dotted hills like a monarch surveying his empire. He stood there now, hands clasped behind his back, letting the orange glow of the sunset frame him in dramatic silhouette. He didn't turn. "Ethan," he said at last, "have a seat." I stayed standing. "You asked to see me." He pivoted slowly, a smug smile curving his lips. "I've been giving some thought to your situation." He glanced at Thompson. "Give us the room." Once the door clicked shut behind his CFO, Gerald sank into the leather armchair behind his desk, fingers steepled like some old-world cardinal. "I'm going to make you an offer. A generous one, considering the circumstances." He slid a leather-bound folder across the desk toward me. "Whitmore Capital is launching a new arm, Whitmore Tech. We're going digital, acquiring talent, buying up small, promising ventures." He emphasized real, as if everything I'd built was some garage experiment with a countdown timer. "I'm offering you a position as junior VP. We'll absorb your company, fold it into our portfolio. You'll report to someone with actual experience." I didn't touch the folder. "And if I'm not interested?" His smile thinned. "Then you should know, I've been talking to some very influential investors. They're ready to compete directly with your services. With my backing, of course." "Are you threatening me?" Gerald let out a dry chuckle. No, just a friendly conversation. Think of it as insurance. The tech space is volatile, Ethan. One glitch, one misstep. Suddenly your clients start asking tough questions. Confidence disappears. Revenue follows. Anger flickered behind my ribs, but I kept my voice level. "I'll think about it." "Don't think too long." He rose, straightening his custom-tailored blazer. "The offer expires in 48 hours. He paused at the door. "And Ethan?" His gaze hardened. "Not a word of this to Camille. She's not equipped to understand how real business works." We left the study in silence. As we entered the dining room, Camille and Eleanor were already seated. Her mother's smile was frozen in place, as practiced as her posture. "Ethan, darling," Eleanor cooed. "Camille tells me your little company is doing so well." I took my seat beside Camille and returned Eleanor's smile with one of my own. Very well, actually. In fact, I reached into my jacket, retrieving a sleek black folder. Not Gerald's. I've got some news to share. If you've ever had to stay silent while someone underestimated you, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what Gerald sees when I open that folder and realize the company he tried to buy is now out of his reach forever. Gerald's fingers tightened around his crystal wine glass. Perhaps business can wait until after dinner? Actually, I said, slipping my phone from my jacket, this can't wait. The press release goes live in about 3 minutes. Camille straightened in her chair, anticipation flashing in her eyes. Even Eleanor tilted her head, curious despite herself. Press release? Gerald scoffed. What could possibly? He didn't finish. The chiming began. Phone after phone around the table lit up in near-perfect sync. Camille's hand darted to her phone first. As she read, a wide, radiant smile spread across her face. Google acquires Nimbus Grid cybersecurity protocol in billion-dollar deal, she read aloud, voice clear and strong. AI-powered system to roll out across global Google Cloud infrastructure. Gerald's face lost all color. He blinked, staring at her like she'd just spoken a different language. There's more, Camille said, scrolling. Exclusive development partnership announced. CEO Ethan Navarro to join Google's Cloud Security Advisory Board. Eleanor's phone slipped from her fingers, clattering softly against her plate. Gerald fumbled for his own, his hands suddenly clumsy as he pulled up the headline with shaking fingers. This is impossible, he stammered. You're a boutique firm, a footnote. Was, I said calmly. We've been scaling quietly for a while now. I began counting on my fingers. Clients include Microsoft, Oracle, IBM. I paused just long enough for it to sting. And Apple reached out this morning. Gerald looked like he might be sick. The same man who had built an empire by dismantling companies one acquisition at a time, now looked as though he'd been outmaneuvered in a game he thought he owned. But the offer I made, he sputtered, to acquire your company. I gave him a polite, razor-edge smile. Google's offer was a little more generous. I leaned in slightly. And unlike you, they don't make veiled threats about what happens when systems fail. The air went still. Camille inhaled sharply, the sound loud in the stunned silence. Her gaze darted to her father. Her voice, when it came, was cool and cutting. Dad, what did you do? Gerald opened his mouth, but no words came. The man who always had the answer, who always owned the room, was suddenly very, very small. Princess, he said finally, his voice barely audible. Business is complicated. Sometimes we take aggressive steps. Camille's eyes turned to ice. Aggressive steps? Like threatening my husband. Eleanor reached across the table and touched her daughter's arm, more out of habit than comfort. Camille, dear, maybe this isn't the place, Eleanor began softly. Not now, Mom, Camille said sharply, brushing her mother's hand away. I want to hear exactly what kind of threats Dad made to the man I married. I reached for my phone and, without a word, tapped play. Gerald's voice filled the dining room, cold, calculated, unmistakably clear. Small operations like yours, well, accidents happen, systems fail, clients lose confidence. Eleanor gasped. Thompson froze by the door, his hands twitching at his sides. Gerald's face, pale already, drained of all remaining color. You recorded me? He choked out. Of course I did, I said, calm and deliberate. You've taught me a lot over the years, Gerald, like how to document everything. Trust no one. Isn't that your golden rule? Camille stood so quickly her chair scraped against the stone floor, echoing through the tense silence. I can't believe you, Dad, she said, voice trembling with fury. You've spent years tearing Ethan down, mocking what he built, and now this? Threatening him into giving it all away? I was trying to help, Gerald protested. Standing as well. Bring him into the fold, offer a future. I let out a short, humorless laugh. A future where I handed you my company and got buried in middle management to keep your ego intact. It's not true. Let's talk truth, Gerald, I cut him off. While you were mocking my little project, I was building something your empire couldn't buy. Something Google now values at over $1 billion. From the corner of the room, Thompson let out a startled cough. Gerald snapped. Get out, and if I hear one word— Actually, I said, raising my hand, Thompson should stay. He'll want to hear this next part. I pulled up another document and slid my phone across the table. Thompson picked it up, his face paling as he scanned the screen. Sir, he stammered, glancing nervously at Gerald. You need to see this. Gerald yanked the phone from him, eyes darting across the screen. What is this, a client list? Not just any list, I said. These are companies preparing to license our security protocol. I paused. Check the third name down. His eyes widened, then flushed red. What more capital? No, we didn't. Your Tokyo division reached out last month, I explained. They're having data breaches, vulnerabilities, issues that could be very public if unresolved. Gerald slammed the phone onto the table. You're bluffing. I smiled, tapping another email. Am I? Because this one's from your head of Asia Pacific. Should I read it aloud? I asked mildly. The part where your head of Asia Pacific details just how vulnerable your systems really are? Enough, Gerald roared, pushing back from the table so forcefully his wine glass rattled. I won't be threatened in my own home. Threatened? I tilted my head, keeping my voice even. I'm just having a father-son chat, looking out for your best interests. Camille let out a sound, half laugh, half sob, and pressed a trembling hand to her lips. Across the table, Eleanor was clutching her pearls like they might hold her upright. What do you want? Gerald asked, and for the first time, his voice had lost its sharpness. Want? I repeated. I never wanted anything from you, Gerald. Not your approval, not your connections, just a little respect for what I built from nothing. I rose, straightened the tie Camille had picked out, and met his eyes. The Google deal goes public in the morning, I continued. I'm sure the press will be very interested in what the great Gerald Whitmore thinks about his son-in-law's billion-dollar success, especially since you've been so vocal calling it an amateur project. Eleanor finally found her voice. You wouldn't dare humiliate the family like that. Camille stepped forward before I could speak. No, Mom. Dad humiliated this family the second he tried to destroy Ethan's company, and chose his pride over my happiness. Gerald sank slowly back into his seat. The fight in him seemed to drain away. For the first time in my life, he looked old. Camille, princess, he started. Don't. Her voice was steel. I'm not your doll in a cocktail dress anymore. I'm a woman who stood by her husband while you tried to break him. The next hour unfolded like a storm breaking after years of silence. Camille confronted decades of manipulation. Eleanor wavered between defending Gerald and worrying about society gossip. Thompson quietly excused himself, likely already preparing his exit strategy. At last Gerald looked at me, not with disdain, not with superiority, but something close to respect. You outplayed me, he said quietly. It wasn't a game, I replied. It was my life's work, something you'd have understood if you'd ever actually looked. He gave a small nod. And now, what happens next? Depends on you, I said. Google's press conference is next week. They want the family there, unified, supportive. He winced, but held my gaze. Yes, he said finally. I can do that. Camille squeezed my hand. And after? After, I said. We learn to be a real family, built on respect, not control. The press conference was set for Thursday morning at Google's New York headquarters. For days, marketing teams from both Google and Nimbus Grid worked around the clock, choreographing every word, every visual, every camera angle. And through it all, Gerald Whitmore remained unusually silent. That morning, I found him in the lobby of the Langham Hotel, suited in his trademark charcoal gray, still polished, still poised, but somehow smaller. Ethan, he said as I approached. Do you have a moment? I checked my watch. We leave in 20 minutes. He nodded and gestured toward a quiet lounge corner. I've been thinking about business, about family, about what really matters. Yeah. He exhaled, shoulders stiff. I was wrong. The words landed between us like thunder. Not just about Nimbus Grid, he continued. About you. I was so focused on how I define success, I couldn't see it taking any other shape. I studied him, wary. Why tell me this now? He ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair. Because in an hour, I'll be standing in front of the world, praising you. And I wanted you to know. He looked me in the eye. I mean, every word. Before I could answer, Camille approached, radiant in a tailored navy suit, eyes locked on mine. Ready? Gerald rose. Ready. The press conference was flawless. Gerald opened with warmth and humility, praising innovation and vision. When a reporter asked about his past comments dismissing tech startups, he gave a dry chuckle. Turns out, success doesn't always wear cufflinks, he said. Sometimes it looks like a young mind refusing to be underestimated. The photos from that morning would be framed in both homes, Camille beaming between Gerald and me, Google's execs shaking my hand beneath a screen flashing, historic cloud security partnership. But what mattered more came after. In the months that followed, Gerald changed. He asked real questions about AI training cycles, latency architecture, quantum mesh redundancies, and listened to the answers. When Apple sent their proposal 2 months later, I called him first. The integration timeline's tight, I said, after outlining the offer. What would you do? He was quiet. Then, push back. Demand more R&D support up front. You're driving the value, don't give it away. I smiled. That's what I was thinking. He laughed. Of course it was. You've got good instincts, Ethan. Maybe better than mine ever were. 1 year after the Google deal, Camille and I hosted a dinner at our new Brooklyn Heights penthouse, smaller than Gerald's estate but with a better view. The guest list that night included key members from both our teams, gathered to celebrate the successful launch of Nimbus Grid's new AI-native security protocol. The mood was warm, electric, a mix of tech pride and family joy. Gerald Whitmore arrived earlier than expected, carrying a slim, carefully wrapped package in his hands. "What's this?" I asked, accepting it with a curious glance. "Open it," he said, shifting slightly on his feet, the closest thing to nervous I'd ever seen him. Inside was a framed article from the Wall Street Journal. Tech visionary Ethan Navarro redefines cloud security for the AI era. But it wasn't the headline that hit me. It was the note tucked into the frame beneath the glass, handwritten in Gerald's sharp, deliberate cursive. To my son, not in-law, just son, who taught me that real business isn't about size, power, or legacy. It's about courage, innovation, and building something that didn't exist before. I'm proud to be part of your story, Gerald. Camille, reading over my shoulder, wiped away a tear with the back of her hand. Gerald cleared his throat loudly. "Yes, well," he muttered, already brushing past the emotion, "just thought you should have that." Then, with perfect timing, "Now where's the champagne? We've got something worth toasting." I watched him move through the room with ease, laughing with our engineers, complimenting Camille's startup founder friend on her pitch deck, asking our lead developer where he learned to write such clean back-end code. Gerald Whitmore, the man who once mocked my company as small-time, had learned not just to respect innovation, but to champion it. "Happy?" Camille asked, slipping her arm through mine as she joined me. I looked around at the mix of family, teammates, and friends, the people who helped build this. "More than happy," I said. "Fulfilled." She grinned. "You know, I still wish I'd seen Dad's face when he dropped that champagne flute at his birthday party." "True," I chuckled, "but what we got instead? Way better." Later that night, after the last guests had gone and Camille had gone to bed, I found Gerald out on the terrace. He was standing at the glass railing, hands in his pockets, staring at the city skyline. "Quite a view," he said as I joined him. Better than yours? I teased. He chuckled. Different, like everything else these days. He turned toward me. You know, when Camille first brought you home, I thought she was making a mistake. A scholarship kid with no name, no pedigree. I couldn't see how that fit into the empire I'd built. And now? He exhaled through his nose. Now I realize she wasn't trying to fit you into my world. She was building a new one that's better. He raised his glass. 2 new worlds. I lifted mine. You family. You family, he echoed, clinking glasses. Then, after a pause, and Ethan, thank you for not destroying me when you had every reason to. I shrugged. That's not what family does. He nodded, and in the silence that followed there was no tension, only peace. 2 men, no longer rivals or reluctant in-laws, but something real. Father and son. The city stretched out before us, glittering, alive, full of dreamers chasing impossible futures. But up here, the battle was over. The empire wasn't broken, it had grown. Stronger, wiser, shaped by the very conflicts that once threatened to divide it. Gerald Whitmore had finally learned what mattered most. Real business, like real family, isn't about control or legacy. It's about building something together, something that changes more than just the industry, something that changes us. And that, as it turns out, was the greatest win of all. If you've ever been told you weren't enough, not smart enough, not connected enough, not their kind of success, then you understand why I fought so hard to build this. I didn't do it to prove anyone wrong. I did it to prove to myself that quiet perseverance could outshine arrogance. If my story resonates with you, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear how you've stayed true to your vision, and if you believe in betting on underdogs with backbone, hit subscribe. Let's keep showing the world what real grit and real respect look like.